Welcome back. And today we have Lily, and we're excited to have her on because she's going to tell us her fabulous story. We want to hear all about your JW story because we haven't heard it before. So, where should we start? Let's start from the very beginning.
A very good place to start.
Well, let's see. Where do we start?
Well, were you born and raised into it?
Close to born in. I remember from old photos that I had found, like, I used to have those little tiny photos that, people had little black and white ones of a Christmas tree in the background and me with like a little toy stuffed horse or something. So there was a Christmas or two and maybe three in my life, but I don't really remember them. So I consider myself always pretty darn close to anything of my thoughts were always JW. We lived in a rural area in northern Florida. At the time, with the organization expanding, my family was in an area where a group from, I guess, somewhere in Pennsylvania, the Jehovah Witnesses that were assigned to our area of Florida, they were told to go to that part of Florida because they needed help.
So there were Pennsylvanians that took a trip down to Florida, and that's how they found you. The
point being that they were not Southerners. They would have stuck out. They would have been different.
Yeah.
They were more Pennsylvania Dutch, I think you call it, but super friendly, helpful, kind. And so what happened is they became our neighbors. And when you're in an area where you're 10 miles from town, it's like your next neighbor is 5 miles, it's like it's a big deal. And so they moved literally right in our area, and even at one point bought part of the property next to us so that another family could move there. So we got surrounded by Jehovah Witnesses, in other words.
They surrounded you.
Yeah, they did. And it was funny because, I'll never forget the older man, his name was Tom, walking up the driveway, howdy neighbor, and just like introducing himself like any regular person would. So they look for your weaknesses. They're going to look where they could get you to be willing to become a Jehovah Witness. With my mom, she was born and raised in Southern Florida. That's where my father met her. He was from New England, so he was a damn Yankee. He was a Yankee. They had 2 children before me. What would have been my older brother died, drowned on the property, and so left that area and moved to northern Florida.
Whoa, wait a minute. How old were you when this happened?
I wasn't born yet.
Oh, you weren't born yet.
And I didn't find out until I was in my 30s that I even had a brother.
What would the age difference had been if he hadn't passed away for you?
Probably a couple years.
Okay.
Yeah, probably a couple years.
Wait a minute. They didn't tell you about your brother until
No, they didn't tell me. I found out by accident.
And wow, that's crazy. And what did you hear about it? What was the story? What did they tell you how it happened?
We as siblings never even knew about it. Right. And my older sister, whom did know about it because she was there as like a little 5-year-old herself, she kind of got blamed for it because, there are 2 kids playing together and, they're on the dock, and one of them, I guess, is maybe just being a regular little kid, and the other one went in the water, and that was that.
That's horrible.
So your sister was 5 when this happened, and your brother was how old?
He probably would have been about 3.
This is crazy because she was 5, he was 3, and they're too young to be responsible. The parents should have been there.
Yeah, where were the parents?
What I just told you came from my sister, my older sister's remembering of this as an adult.
Wow.
that she, as a little kid, was traumatized.
Oh, yeah. Not only is she traumatized by witnessing it, but now she's traumatized by mom, dad, or whoever who's blaming
Blaming.
her
Right.
for, hey, that was your little brother. Why weren't you watching him?
Yeah, just something so simple as that. Not that it was an intentional attack upon her, but you can just picture the whole scene, you know. And I mean, you imagine how, like, kind of like how you guys are shot like this. This is how I was when I found out. And I'm asking like 100 questions trying to figure it out.
I think she was like triple traumatized because then not only those two things, but then she had to obviously keep quiet about it for a really long time.
She never talked about it. She never talked
it's-
about it until
It's so strange.
years later, whenever we both were somewhat out of the religion, so to speak.
And also, too, the era back
That's a
then,
lot.
there used to be a time where kids didn't wear seatbelts in cars. So back then, that was the mentality.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That was the mentality. You look out for your brother and sister. Why were you doing that? And now we fast forward to now, and most people would be like, what? Like, that's not the 5-year-old's responsibility. That's the parents' responsibility. So
Yeah.
it was a very different time. So I
Yeah.
can give them that, but that's traumatizing. This is intense.
So,
Yeah, I know.
so my mom's pretty traumatized. She has to leave the area where she was a beach girl. She moved what would have been my older sister, and they moved to northern Florida near the Georgia area. That's where the accent, comes from. It's more Georgia than Florida, because most Floridians in the second bottom half of the state, they all come from other places. So the real Floridians usually have an accent and the others don't. When this happened, she was traumatized. The very nice new neighbors were very understanding and, told her things that the religion would say about how you'll see your,
Him. Yes. In the paradise. They're going to
Yep.
use that. They're going to get your story and use that to get you in.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And up to that point, my father, he was super well loved and respected in the community. He was known to be very helpful. If you were building a barn, he was there. If you needed help moving a horse, he was there. Whatever it was. And as well as he was raising his, what would have been 2 oldest daughters, we were raised on a farm. And so we did all the things that, kids would do to help out on a farm. He didn't think anything of having new neighbors or that there would be any agenda, but the agenda started to happen whenever mom started pressuring him that he needed to be interested in the religion. So now what was taken away from my father was the ability to just be a family. Now he had to be a certain type of family. And obviously, my mom felt extremely passionate about it because the
That hope.
concept of, that hope. Very
She
good.
wanted to see your brother. So at this point, just to get the audience so we're all on the same page, at this point, it's just you and your sister, correct? No other siblings?
I think there was 4 of us. There's 5 altogether. My older sister, myself, younger sister, and then 2 younger brothers. And when I found out that I had an older brother, I don't think the last one was born yet. I think he was after that. Because how I found out was I'm cleaning out this closet that mom had, it was full of all kinds of stuff. And so she had given me that job to clean out. And I'm cleaning them out. There's all these big baby pictures that are in there. The old pretty black and white baby pictures, the kind that a professional will take. And I lined up, and who is this? This one. This is this one. It just didn't make any sense. And so I took the picture and I asked my mom, and just as casually as could be, she goes, "Oh, that's your older brother, Timothy."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like,
Like it's
"Who the-
nothing.
Like, who the hell is Timothy?
Right.
This is shocking.
And she just kind of wanted me just to push it aside.
But that
And
also is typical JW behavior. The way they just act nonchalant about things, especially when they've been indoctrinated to think of this other thing that's going to happen one day. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Everything was based on that. It just really screws up people's lives.
Yeah,
It
well,
does.
the way they treat death, like even now, I remember having conversations with my own mom, and their thinking is, we're going to be in the paradise. Don't waste your time on the funeral. Don't waste your time on burying me. Just cremate me. It doesn't matter. Like they literally are so nonchalant about death. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, mom. When someone dies, it's more or less for the person you leave behind. The people you leave behind, they need something or to feel so connected with you. So you being so nonchalant about it, like it's no big deal, it's crazy. So that's how I feel your mom was acting about your brother.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, years ago, I realized that she was traumatized. When I was mad at her for such a large period of my life, I eventually realized, oh my God, she was so traumatized. Whenever we had what would seem to be a normal family life, it changed. I also got to see the dynamic because even though when I was very little, I had an awareness of things. I was very astute. I picked up things, quickly in terms of like observing, everything around me. I could see how unhappy my dad was. I could see how unhappy my mom was because she just wanted to be doing everything they were telling us to do. And so she was dragging us, all to meetings. Now, to go to meetings, we had to go like an hour and a half away because there's
Yikes.
no Kingdom Hall, I was understanding more about the destruction part of the religion, even as a little kid, versus just going along in the religion.
You could see how it was affecting everything.
Everything, the dynamic, especially my dad. And then because how they groom you. And so my mom would have been groomed to separate from family, right? Separate from the neighbors you normally do, isolate yourself more, and only associate with the JWs, right? You can
Yeah.
go out in service, you can be friendly, you can be kind, but you have an agenda.
I'm just thinking from your mom's point of view, that or the death of her child there was probably, this is why it made it so appealing for her, because
It
she's
did.
thinking my
Yeah.
whole family's going to be together again in the new system.
Yeah. You got it.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Yeah.
they also groom women. If the woman is the one that gets snagged by the religion and the husband's not there, they groom the woman to bring the husband in. And if the husband says no, then they tell the woman, oh, that he's like not spiritual, or they almost treat the man like he's nothing now, like he's not a part of anything.
Right.
You,
You just
get
said
what
it. So that's what happened to my dad. My dad, who was a very well respected, honorable person in the community, was not respected in the community that my mom was isolating us in because he just wanted to continue to be himself and have his family be the same. And instead, he was being told, well, I don't want to go over and see the so-and-sos this weekend because, they're not Jehovah's Witnesses or they're bad association. And it's like, what's the concept of bad association? How did they all of a sudden become bad association?
Well, it's Watchtower's definition
Yeah.
of what
So,
bad association is.
yeah. So that's what I mean when I say she was definitely being groomed. And then her job is to sort of maneuver the mate to accept it. And if they don't accept it, then they're considered opposed.
Right.
And in
An
that
opposing
day,
spouse. Yeah.
yeah.
They use that. Yeah.
And then at a certain point, they get another classification if they try and shake you out of your dumb stupor. That was the whole next level, is whenever my dad fought it for many years, 5+ years. He fought it. When he finally stopped fighting it is when my older sister was now she was already 16 or turning 16. And she had already quit school and she went and got her GED because, don't go to school. You don't need to do all that. So she went and got her GED, full-time pioneer, the whole 9 yards at a very young kid, or at least a part-time pioneer. My dad really felt, this is my impression, the grief and the lack of being able to stop what was taking place within his family.
He was watching it happen and he felt like helpless to stop it.
Yeah.
And
so then he became where he tried to stop my sister from doing all the things that she was doing, because she was lining her life right into JW-ism in all the ways that they groom you to be.
Which is literally throwing your life away. You're literally saying, I don't want any future. I'm just going to do everything Watchtower tells me. And this also, I want to bring up, you said GED and that whole idea. Now they gaslight you. This frustrates me because I remember even at my age, them, deterring us from going to college and all that. And that's, college to me, that's a whole nother topic. I do believe that there's scammery behind that. But anyways, that's not why Watchtower was telling us not to go.
Right.
It wasn't because they're like, oh, college is a scam. They were trying to control us by not having to go somewhere else, so we would focus only on Watchtower. And now I still remember a few years back having a conversation with my mom saying, I remember when I was in high school, I really didn't care. I was an A student, but at one point I didn't care about getting A's because then I was like, why am I putting all this effort in? All my friends are going to college and they're all trying to get, into good colleges. And for me, it's like, I don't need to go to college. I'm not going to college. So why would I go out of my way to do all this? Right. Well, I talked to her about that and she's like, well, you can go to college. You could have gone to college. And I'm like,
okay.
You guys
love that gaslighting.
Yes, they gaslight because as the light gets brighter, they change things slightly.
We never said you couldn't go to college.
Oh,
yeah, it was all in my head, right? And it's like, no, if everyone is saying this, it's not us that are crazy. I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? They gaslight you.
It's very trippy whenever I hear some people say just what you're describing, like it didn't happen that way. In my generation, it happened that way.
Yeah.
There's
we lived
no
it.
doubt about it.
Yeah. We lived it. We know it happened. We were there. Okay. You can't gaslight us.
Yep. 100%.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Whenever it got to that point, why do I have to do all this? Why? Because nothing about it felt right, because from the very beginning, it felt like it didn't ever feel happy. It didn't ever feel like it was a good thing. It's like there was a point when my mom met another sister. She wasn't, quote, in the congregation, but she met another sister that had 4, 5, 6 kids herself. And her mate was the same way. So my mom and her mom used to put all those kids in the big, station wagon with the wood grain on the side of it. And we would drive the hour or however long it was to go to a neighboring congregation.
I remember those wood wagons, the wood looking station wagons.
Yeah, my neighbor had one.
Yeah.
My neighbor had one.
It was like, you're a little kid, and the first few times all of you are piling in, it's kind of fun because you're hanging out with other kids, and that's all cool. But then that gets old when the parent, which was my mom, was trying to drag us to meetings, 3 times a week and get us to be quiet. And when she could get us, somehow or another out in service, it just everything about it just felt like, why am I doing all this? Whenever they actually made a congregation there in our area down the street, it started in their house, in the people's house. And then it expanded to, they converted their garage, they made it like a standalone concrete garage. And then once we got to that point where they had a standalone building, then there were other ones that moved into the area, and I would now know that they were called missionaries from other areas. And some of those people were very interesting because they had been to places like Honduras and they had been to other countries. They were like, once you get the initial few families, then you bring in the rest of them. And then you take the families from other congregations that are, like, say, in between the territories, and then they would put them in the new congregation. And what was interesting is the missionary couple that came, that was from Honduras. Well, the wife, she had dark hair, she spoke a little different, very pretty lady, and her husband was American. And so he must have got his wife from being in Honduras. Okay. As a little kid,
like a mail order bride. But a JW, JW mail order bride.
Yeah, JW style. Well,
yes.
I remember as a very young little girl feeling inappropriate energy from people, inappropriate energy from men in particular.
Yeah, like predators, predatorial type behavior.
Yeah.
Did you get that sense from him?
Oh, sure.
Okay, see, that brings me to my point about back to the mail order bride. I feel like that's also part of the JW culture, that the men have the pickings. They can pick whoever they want.
Oh,
so if
he
was much older than her.
See?
She was young.
Yep. So if they don't find anyone, if they don't find anyone local, they go over to Honduras or these other countries. And it's the same idea as a mail order bride. JW women are treated like that, is what I'm saying. Would we not agree with that?
And you're also taught you're under the man, period. You're subservient to them. So, I mean,
it's the misogyny is strong with them.
Very much so. I definitely was able to essentially read people.
And how old were you at this time, do you think?
Little.
And you could sense this stuff. That's crazy. It's amazing.
Yeah. I was very, quote, intuitive, but I didn't know the word was intuitive or, other words to describe. I just kind of call it a sense of knowing. And I did not know that I was any different that way. I just thought it was kind of normal that everybody in their head knew things that were about other people. It was natural. And I was raised around animals a lot. I had horses and, different animals. I was kind of a loner in my sense that I spent a lot of time alone, me and my horse, or going riding or doing different things. And
I love horses. What was your horse's name,
I know,
Lily?
I always wanted a horse.
Yes. I was a My Little Pony girl. Yes. Like I was never a Barbie girl. I had a few Barbies, but I loved My Little Pony. So what was your horse's name, Lily, growing up?
Well, there were many. There were a lot of horses.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, there were a lot of horses. And
did you name them things like Moon Dreamer?
I had one that was my horse for most of my teenage years, Chiquita. Chiquita, meaning little one. Yeah. It was a mental salvation. Honestly, it was. So I think in a lot of ways that kind of helped with the telepathic communication, helped with the concept of being in my head and thinking and communicating with my animals and having them respond.
That's amazing.
So, you
were connecting with them. They were also your emotional support animals.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the term they use nowadays, emotional support. It was, but it really was, yes.
Yeah. And so it did. It's like I was developing in the religion naturally, just from the environment that was being created. And, picking up information, understanding information from other people, as well as being able to feel a certain way, connected in ways that people, are more open about being that way now. But I was also very alone. And because I didn't have any outside knowledge or training or information from anybody else to help guide me in any of that, I didn't understand that I was what was called an empath. and an empath, which I didn't learn that term till a lot of years later, is where you are empathic or you can pick up information by using your senses. And there also, if you use the term psychic or the terms that are associated with someone who is clairaudient, clairsentient, clairvoyant. Yeah,
Yes.
all they call those the clairs.
That's how we know you in the community as empath lady.
There you
That's
go.
That's actually how I knew you first before I knew you as
Me too.
who you really
Yeah.
were, Lily. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And so I was able to pick up whenever something was going on. But I didn't understand that I was doing that. And so if there was a dynamic where somebody, like say my mom and dad are upset each other, I'm feeling that and feeling like they're upset at me. And I know that children in general, like, children are usually a lot more that way. But then either they shut it off to compensate and to be able to cope, or they're told, oh no, that's not, you can't do that. Whenever I was in the environment of my mom and dad during the opposition where my dad was opposed, oh my God, I just was always so mad, always so upset.
Intense
all the time.
energy. You were
Yeah.
dealing with intense energy and it was coming onto you.
Yeah.
And it's like that saying or that feeling when someone comes in the room, you can feel their energy, and you were so in tune to that when that was around you, it created you to feel that way. I don't know if you guys ever watched the show Charmed with Shannon Doherty, the original one, but there was an episode where she became an empath. Shannon Doherty's character became an empath, and she could hear and feel everyone's like conversations, their pain, their sadness, their joy, and it literally made her crazy.
It's taken most of my life now from being out, and I got out of the religion at age 40, and I'm almost 66, to be able to learn how to have those things happening to you, not only use those abilities in a positive way, but also to use them to help heal different people, work with different people or animals or whatever it is. I learned how to use what I had, but yet not let it cripple me, because there are many empaths that there's different degrees that they can't go out. They can't.
Yeah.
And what was interesting that happened to me is when I was married at 19, and I moved away from my environment, my little country environment, and I ended up in South Jersey. I became what somebody told me I was agoraphobic. And I was like, what is that? Because I had this intense, I got panicked to have to go out, to go to the store or to drive someplace. Not only was I out of my small town atmosphere, I was now surrounded by gads of people and energies and cars and businesses. It was just stimulation override.
Overload.
Yeah. And even the normal person, when you go to something like an event like the state fair, or you go somewhere where there's tons of people, it is overstimulating. So imagine if you are an empath and you can sense everybody's energies. And then let's throw
don't
in
understand it. And you don't understand.
It's crazy.
Oh, I'm sensing everybody's energy. You just know you're freaking out inside.
Yes. And I can only imagine too, with the added era of cell phones. I refuse to go to the state fair because I used to love going to the state fair back before cell phones. And even then it was like, oh, too many people. But now with the cell phones and all the energy, you can sense it. I don't care who you are. Even if you don't realize you're sensing it, you can sense those EMFs. I don't like it. I avoid it myself. So I can only imagine what you feel, Lily.
And what you just said, now I know we just did a video, like an impromptu one the other day. The three of us were talking. I was really struggling. Like, I wasn't mad, but I was feeling the intensity of all of the people in the buildup about what's going to happen on Saturday, being
Mm,
today.
yeah.
And you know, everybody hate, and sometimes you know, people like myself and just people awakening more in general to this is being in a more natural state. It was overwhelming to me. Sometimes I find it hard feel like jovial, smile, happy, well, you know, like airy
Mhm.
fairy. It's
No, I
like,
relate to you on that because I don't know how you felt, Cindy, but I woke up and I'm trying today and I'm trying to stay off of social media and I don't want to be looking at the Iran stuff and the riots, which is what they put on your face
mhm,
24/7.
yep,
Like I've been avoiding that stuff, but I woke up feeling that way too. Like you just said, as you're
yeah,
realizing you're getting into your intuitive side,
yep,
you start to sense the energy of the world. You see
yes,
what I'm
ma'am,
saying? And
yep.
I was like, I woke up feeling anxious and I'm like, why am I feeling anxious right now? There's nothing for me personally right now where I should be feeling anxious. It was bizarro world, right?
Oh, yeah, what a nightmare.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's funny because, um, you know, when you say tell your story, it's like, you know, yeah, typical JW, right? But then when each individual
Mhm.
person talks about what their life experience was like, then we're able to self-analyze, and you know, or you can take a textbook and kind of read about yourself in a textbook, because how we all get to be this are traumatized, scars, all these things that we all experience. And then we kind of, and especially when you take and you throw in a religion of some sort of controlled nature, like, you know, JW, Scientology, Mormonism, whatever it is, the religion that kind of pigeonholes you into being a certain way. It's,
Totally.
it kind of really,
You're right. It
um,
turns you into something you're not. You're not
yeah.
able to be
Exactly.
yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
so I'll go back to childhood. My years were very, very, very lonely because there weren't any kids that were my age. And eventually, more people from the community come in that maybe have kids. I don't remember having any witness friends all
Wow.
through my like first seventh or eighth grade, at least. It was weird because at a certain point, um, I realized I didn't have girlfriends. And I was like, you know, because whenever there was a few families and all, you know, like there, you know, maybe they had guys. And so I was able to be besties with guys or girls, either way, you know, it's like it wasn't one way or the other. But then when there was families that were there that had a lot of kids, it made it easier, but they're not always in your same grade, you know, and
Mhm.
so therefore you don't see them. And so there was two or three in high school. I remember that I had two or three JW friends, you know, that we were able to at least hang out a little bit, but we weren't, not any of us were like really close, you know.
Mhm.
And then there
Yeah,
was some,
there's did you feel like there was that like weirdness, like, because I know I had that weirdness of like you can't be your real self around your witness, the witness kids.
around the witnesses. Well,
Yeah.
not not so much. It's like I was the kind of kid that my nature was not towards trying to be a bad kid or try to, you know, hang out and smoke or drink or anything like that. That wasn't my nature. Um, and the kids that I already knew, the neighborhood kids, it was more like it was harder to be around other people because everything in the religion was you don't do this, this, and this. And so there were no parties, there were no, you know, hanging out and going on
Yeah.
hay rides with regular neighbors or people. So it
Well,
was
what about your
just,
school? How big was your school? How many kids? Was it a smaller
Yeah.
school or what was that like for you?
the school was bigger after they mixed the black and white together.
That's
And
crazy. You lived through segregation.
Yeah, she lives. Yeah, that's what she said
Whoa.
before. Yeah.
My mind is blown, Lily. I don't even think about that. Like, you lived through that.
Oh,
I did. I remember in 6th grade that they took and they integrated, and there were the whites went to the black school. We went over to the middle school, which was a black school, and an interesting thing happened for me. I didn't even know of any black people at that point in the Jehovah Witness religion, because the congregation where we were was all white.
yeah, because the Jehovah's Witnesses were segregated also, just like the world.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
And so-
crazy. Wow.
And so how I found out that there were other black Jehovah Witnesses is because the trickle down effect of riots in the Midwest, they eventually went to the southern states. It wasn't that, at least in my area, that the southern states were rioting first. They started it in the northern states. People were on edge. And remember, you have limited knowledge because you've only got your 3 television stations and a newspaper, and that's it. So you didn't have the propagation of whatever agenda they were pushing. At a certain point, the riots hit our own individual schools. A riot happened. I may have been in 7th grade, but it happened about that time. So there was a lot of tension between black and white. And realize, in the black and white community that was our town, there was not tension before that. What I mean is, we saw people on the road, in the stores, going to the feed store, doing crops. We all did the same things, black and white. In our where our home was, most of our neighbors were black neighbors. The white neighbors were the neighbors that moved in. So it was like not a thing for any of us to feel weird about black people. But now we're in a school, and all of a sudden it's like people are getting weird. They're getting riled up. I had a few situations where I didn't have any other JW friends in the school. There may have been, but I didn't necessarily know them. And they weren't at our congregation, and they weren't in my grade, so I didn't see them. If I would go into the restroom, there I could get surrounded by a group of black girls, and they would harass me, and they would do their best to intimidate me. I actually, which, honing another skill, learn how to be able to navigate that. I wasn't a troublemaker. I was more of a peacemaker. And I was able to talk logically to people in 6th or 7th grade, not like a little 6th or 7th grader. I was able to talk like an adult would talk to a group of kids and use reason. And so I talked my way out of more than one or two, several incidents where I could have had, crap beat out of me. When the riots happened, I remember there was a situation where we were at the back of the school, and in order to make your way up to where the parents would be eventually picking you up, you had a lot of ground to cover. And there were pockets of people that were really upset. And there was a girl that rode my school bus, country school bus. You know the people on your bus. They were more your friends because you rode the bus with them every day. She had no concept of survival skill. And so she was a target, and I sort of like pulled her with me, hid under cars, all kinds of things in order to get through that. I remember that when we were like hiding beside a building, we could see the cars coming up, and there would be like men sitting on top of the cars going into the bus pickup area, to pick up the families or the kids. All the brothers, the ones that the adult men, the husbands whom had moved in with that other family, they were all on like my mom's car coming to pick us all up.
The
And-
JW brothers, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
the JW men and the new congregation. I wanted to be able to, just get through that time period. And yet I found that after that, there were some Black people that kind of clued me in why they didn't beat the crap out of me. And it was because they said, so and so, this girl who's a cheerleader, that Black popular girl, she had told them, leave that white girl alone. Just leave her alone. It's because
Wow.
she was a Jehovah Witness in another congregation. And
Wait
She
a
was a
minute.
cheerleader?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. What?
What?
yep.
But that's not allowed.
Well, but in the Black congregation, I think it was a little more normal. They got
Wow,
they did
that's
things like
so
dancing all the
interesting.
time. So I was like, oh my God, they became my best friends at that point. I
Yeah.
Nice.
used to go to their house all the time, dance and hang out, and just, I was like, that was the friends that I had at that point. I didn't have friends in necessarily my neighborhood, but I did develop some friends at school that were Jehovah Witnesses. And eventually, whenever the congregations did integrate, then, that happened. And, and then as a teenager, like a teenager, you know how that transition from you're young to kind of you start making more older friends and stuff like that. So I didn't understand the segregation of the North because it wasn't, even though I lived through the riots, it was, we didn't have hatred, at least in my world and in my family's world. And within the town, we didn't have segregation. Now, I'm not going to say that there wasn't years before where Black people were probably, dealing with things because of the era of like slavery and stuff like that, because I grew up in a plantation town that generations before me would have had plantations and
Right.
with loads and loads of land around. So,
And when you
but-
say riots, can you tell us when this happened? What era or decade? What would you call these riots? Like, if someone's looking into history, what would be the name or the place in history that these riots you're talking about happened?
just
60s
Yeah.
riots?
yeah,
Like, so
Yeah.
civil rights, would you say it was during a civil rights riots movement
yeah,
type of
because
thing?
it would have been in the 60s. I graduated in 77. Okay. So if you go backwards in years, so it would have been the late 60s.
Okay. And I'm also trying to think about in history where we were with, like, things politically and war wise. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm sure lots of crazy stuff was happening
Yeah.
during the 60s.
We were in Florida, therefore, right next to Cuba, that whole time period of the Cuban Missile Crisis, as they called it, it was a very real thing. And so my dad had dug a giant hole with like a bulldozer and got a school bus and buried a school bus in the ground as a bomb shelter.
Whoa, 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 whoa. What? A whole school bus he buried in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. That must have taken a long time.
Is it still there?
I think it is still there. Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Lily, I thought this was just gonna be a JW story, but we got a whole
This
bunch
is
of
so interesting. Yeah.
this could be a movie. Oh
Mm.
my gosh. So your dad buried a school bus, then what?
By himself?
I was too little to remember details, but I remember that I was fascinated that somewhere under my feet was a school bus.
So there was a real fear of a missile crisis with Cuba, so much so that your dad buried a bus under the ground.
Well,
That
and
is-
didn't they have the nuclear where the kids were like under their desks like this?
Yeah, did you live
Like-
through that?
A few drills, yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
would save
Yeah.
you. Yes,
Yeah.
kids. Just go under your desk. A nuclear bomb won't touch you if you're
And
under
cover
your
your
desk.
head. Cover your head. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were scaring people back then.
Yeah,
You
it
know?
sounds like
Mhm.
they're always scaring people.
Yep.
Always, always.
Yep.
Wow.
And the riots, I mean, there were probably 3 individual events of riots at our school. I remember there was breaking windows, doing things to the people's cars that were parked around there, parked at the school. People in the South are much more, at least they used to be, disciplinary. Okay. So if you had a child that was acting up and it wasn't your kid, but you could still say something to that kid and the kid would be respectful of you.
Mm.
That was
Again, a
just,
different era. Yeah.
yeah, that was just a general respect. And so on the school buses, each individual school bus driver, especially when you're on the bus for an hour or two, and they're going to have to see those kids, that bus driver would have to gain respect level with the whole bus, right? It's not like you're just going like short little distances. One of the bus drivers happened to be white, told the black kid to sit down. The black kid got mouthy and became aggressive. And so the bus driver somehow or another either like put their hand on the kid or pushed the kid away or something. And that was it. A riot happened.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Well, it sounds similar to now.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
It
Yeah.
feels like, yeah, everything's backwards and upside down and inside out. So
So
where did this
it was a lot,
intense? Yes.
when you're growing up. And so you understand about controversy. Basically, my life was simple, in terms of country life. You had gardens and you had animals and you had, dairy. So, I mean, I grew up in a healthy environment
That way, yeah.
versus, that kind
Well,
of stuff.
what were you witnessing? That's a funny word to use, witnessing, when we're talking about witnesses.
Hmm.
What were you witnessing during the riots and during this time that the JWs, what was your experience of what you were seeing them doing or
Good
not
question.
doing? What were they doing at that
Yeah,
time?
what were they saying, like how to behave during that time?
or
Like,
react or their
Um,
stance?
It was not anything that stuck out to say they acted weird. It was more like the concept of being peaceable. It was just like it was like a flare up. Oh gosh, there's a riot, and then, a year later, oh gosh, because there were several years that riots took over. And there'd be flare ups. And I can only imagine in terms of today that there were probably issues that were going on in the political world, and they were creating scenarios that there would be these flare ups.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I remember, supposedly as a result of the white bus driver disciplining the black kid, for some reason or another, it got blown out of proportion. The witness men that came to the aid of all of us, basically their goal was just to get us, from the school.
So
The
they were like
town,
protecting you. It was like
yeah,
when this stuff was happening, they felt they had to come to protect.
they did. Yeah,
the-
because we couldn't get on the school buses and have them take us back home. Somehow or another, they were now feeling like there was something they needed to be irritated about.
Yeah.
It's like there was honestly peace in the schools. I mean, we didn't have fights all the time. We didn't
Well,
have
it's
the
because
level
someone was in their ear, just like nowadays. Someone's in
yes,
the ears of the people all the time, telling one side that they're being oppressed and the
yes.
other side that they're the oppressor, and the next thing you know, everyone's fighting. It sounds like a very similar thing.
But
History repeats itself.
the townspeople weren't fighting.
Mhm.
It only happened at the school.
Interesting.
Our
Okay.
neighbors weren't fighting. We were
Yeah.
so helping our neighbor with his cow that got out. You know,
Yeah.
our black neighbor with his cow that got out.
Yeah, you're still we're friends and mutuals.
Yeah.
Mutuals. I can't believe I used that word.
Mutuals. Oh God.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I just used that word. Oh my god.
Oh
So
boy.
You
so
know that we were actually more than mutuals.
okay. Okay, so you also got to live because you said at this time, this is very fascinating to me. At this time,
I'm glad you gals were liking it because I'm thinking, oh, what could be interesting about what I might have to say?
are you kidding me? You lived through
No,
a
it's
really
very interesting.
like crazy time in history, right? You
Yeah.
are proof that they use these same tactics over and over again to create division amongst all of us, depending upon, doesn't matter if it's race or gender or whatever, they use the same playbook. And your
And
story
here's the
is being
thing,
told.
you'd never recognize it at the time. I mean, typically a lot of people don't recognize it at the time. Now that there are people that are starting to recognize these things, it's always
Mhm.
been this way.
Yes,
Now
so
we can go look back and see it.
yeah, so I'm fascinated, Lily, because you got to live through. So
Yeah.
you said there were JW white congregations and JW black congregations. Am
I
I
didn't
understand
even
that?
know that there were black congregations.
When did you find out? When the cheerleader stood up for you,
Yes.
or
When the other girls told me the reason why I wasn't attacked was because this girl, I didn't even know who she was. And they said, that girl. And I said, that cheerleader? And they're like, yeah. And then I talked to her and found out that she was a witness in another congregation.
But see, it's so weird because she knew that you were a witness.
yeah,
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I never
right,
thought of that. How would she have known? Probably
exactly.
because maybe I wouldn't have been saluting the flag at the different,
Oh,
you know.
Yeah, that's
She,
yeah, like if there
she
was
saw.
you bring up a great point.
assembly or
I don't have an
something.
answer for that. I
Yeah,
don't.
well, if she's watching, thank you for protecting Lily. We appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
But I want to know. So you got to witness again. There's that word. I'm so sorry. You got to witness them coming together, right? The congregations eventually
Yes,
integrated, right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you lived through that. You were still
Yes.
going to meetings at that time, right? And
Yep.
doing
Because that there was no white or black congregation in that town. That little very beginning congregation was white. In the beginning of the congregation, there were not any black brothers and sisters. It was not until there was integration. And then once the congregation um, experienced what the world was experiencing, then our congregation was very full because we had a lot of black people.
okay.
So
So as the world started integrating and getting rid of segregation here in America, Jehovah Witnesses followed along with that. So hey, they've been sheep since the beginning of time. They followed only because everyone else was doing it,
that's such
right?
an interesting observation. Wow.
Sheep following sheep. Bah. This is so interesting. Okay, so tell us, because eventually, obviously, you left, and there was things that happened that led you to leaving. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. When I was approaching graduation, I think I was already 17. I had a variety of regular worldly friends, okay, that were at school. I didn't socialize outside school, but I socialized in school. And there was just like a hi, how are you kind of respect, right? There was another guy that was a worldly guy, and he was also struggling with what he was going to do with his life. And we kind of like bonded a little bit. And I remember there was this moment where he was like, because he wanted to kind of run away from his life. And I wanted to run away from his life. We weren't really romantic. I mean, he was one of the popular boys, and he always had a cheerleader girlfriend, that kind of stuff. But for some reason or other, I guess because I talked adult things and realistic things that were on his mind, he appreciated my interaction. And he was from a local family that would have been long established there for many generations. And there was something in his life, and it's interesting. I never got to know what it was, why he would not want to be, that popular kid going forward. It really gave me the opportunity to see somebody struggling and acknowledge that I was struggling. It's like it was one of the first times that I really got to acknowledge that I was not happy where I was, and the concept of maybe I could somehow or another leave. I had already just forced myself to get baptized because I would have been a late baptism person, and I literally forced myself, and the entire time it wasn't right for me, but my mom had promised that if I just got baptized, I'd feel it then.
And that was
so
how old? What age?
How old? Yeah, what age are you?
16, almost 17.
Okay. So you got baptized and you felt forced because your mom wanted you to do it.
Yeah. And when I was riding in the baptismal band to go to the pool where it was, I looked around and I just felt this, like that movie surreal kind of feeling, like I do not belong here. And everybody's happy, and I'm looking at them joking and happy, and I'm by myself mentally, emotionally. And I went in the water, and when I came out of the water, I remember thinking of my dad, who I watched my dad force himself to get baptized. And in order for the sake of the family, to keep peace in the family, my dad forced himself to get baptized.
That is so sad too, that he felt that he had to do that just to keep his family together. I mean, that's probably what he was thinking.
I was 12 years old, and I looked at my dad, and I had a knowing. I knew that my dad could not be happy unless he left the religion, and he knew that would be the end of the family. And so therefore he was going to harm himself, and he would be unhappy. And I even told him at age 12 one day, I said, this is my dad. About this time we became friends, my dad and I, because I, as a 12-year-old, was talking to him like an adult. And I was telling him, like an adult therapist, basically, I understand. I see what you're going through and what you're having to do in order for mom to be okay with the whole entire thing. He was not happy. And so I saw things change in my dad, and I knew it was because of the religion. And I had a very strong sense of that religion is not necessarily a healthy thing.
And
For
then
some
you
people,
ended up
yes.
following in your father's footsteps and doing the same thing pretty much.
Right. You were, yes, you were sensing the toxicity that comes along with being a part of that.
Thank you.
That whole
Figuring that
dynamic.
out.
Yep.
Yep.
And then you yourself going against everything in your gut because you were young and you were 16 and you were trying to make your mom happy, just like your dad was.
Yep.
You did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Exactly. When I was 17, I went through what people classify, I guess, as a depression. I didn't consider it a depression. I considered it a reality check that I'm screwed. I'm like, I had been doing a little job that my dad had got me at a place that he used to work. And it was at a research station where they did weed science there.
She means weeds, like in the grass, right?
Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. Weeds in the ground.
So my dad was a county agent, and he went on and he moved his way up to work for the state. And so he got a job eventually in the dairy division in the state of Florida, but he had a state job. Okay. And so
but wait, if he was doing weed stuff, and this is not marijuana weed, I know weeds, doesn't that mean he was somehow in the early beginnings affiliated with Monsanto or Roundup or any of those companies possibly?
Very good. Okay. So yes, I am one of the people that before Roundup had a name, it had a number, B6452 or whatever the number was. And at the place that I had a little job, one of my jobs was weed science. Okay. You know, my job was to take the plants, pot them, weigh them, cut them all about the same height and width, put them all on a plot of ground.
She was potting weed.
The professor that I worked for, he would take down the data. You'd spray the plants, and I was one of the people that put on the little white paper thin zipper thing. Okay.
Like
That
the
didn't
hazmat suit? Are you talking about like a hazmat suit?
It was a joke. It was paper. It didn't protect you. Okay.
Oh
So
my goodness.
It was
you,
all psychological protection.
yeah,
Just like masks.
Yeah.
it was funny. It wasn't funny. I questioned it. I was like, so you're handling, because it wasn't just those chemicals, it was weed science. So it'd be a lot of different chemicals. And, you know, I remember looking as he's stirring up the mixtures one time, and the spoon is kind of like melted away. And I'm looking at the bottle, you know, and I see like the symbol for like dangerous, you know, crossbones or whatever it was.
The poison.
Yeah, the poison.
Oh,
And I remember
symbol, yeah.
asking him about it and saying, aren't you concerned? You know, at least I would put on rubber gloves, right? And, oh no, chemicals are good, because we honestly grew up with okay, you can go to this little museum in Florida, where you go in, and in a section of this museum, they have this room. You go in this little area of the museum, and it's all the propaganda, the little signs and the little statements and the little cartoon figures of chemicals.
Oh my God.
It reminds me of
Wow.
the cigarette ones where they used to
Yeah.
say cigarettes, doctor
Yes.
approved, doctor
Yeah.
approved.
Yeah.
Exactly. But basically, it was like that was the era. And so, you know, the professor that I had, I'm sure he must have died of cancer a long time ago. But unfortunately, I was not there very long. My dad did this like when he was in his 20s. You know, that was like one of his first jobs. Me leaving meant that my dad would not have a friend or someone who understand what he was suffering in the religion. I knew that by me leaving, the feeling was that he would die. He wouldn't have anybody. I felt that within a couple years, 2-3 years, he would probably be dead. We did move, and he did die within 2 or 3 years. It was shortly after I left, I think in 1980 or 81, maybe 2, thereabouts somewhere. He was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was also in a disfellowship state. It was because when I left, he decided to start having an affair with somebody.
Oh, okay. Because your mom and him were no longer.
They had not had sex for years.
But were they still living together?
Yes.
Okay. And so then he
But-
decided to have a relationship because he wasn't. Your mother was probably treating him like he was a nothing burger, right?
Yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
was no longer doing witnessy things. And so
Right.
then that literally took away their relationship. And so then he found love elsewhere, and that's what got him disfellowshipped.
Yes. He had a secretary that he had known for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They were friends. And so it just kind of.
Did he just tell the elders that, like, on his own?
Yeah, how'd they find
No,
out?
in a not nice way. My mom got a call one day from a doctor saying that they needed my father to come back to the hospital. They had done his blood work after they did his procedure and found out that he had a certain stage of diabetes and some other things, and they needed him to come back right away. And she wanted to know, what procedure did you have? Well, evidently my dad was not circumcised. And so I guess because he was now having sex with somebody, she wanted him to be circumcised. And so he got circumcised. That was how my mom found out that he was cheating.
Whoa.
Wow.
Just when you think the story can't get any crazier.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I would be kind of suspicious too. Like, oh, after all these years, you decide to get circumcised. That's
Well,
Wow,
out
yeah.
I mean,
of the blue.
I agree. It wasn't correct or right what he did. He still had, 3 other kids living at home. He was the sole support. So he, I guess, thought that was the best thing to do, was just to keep everything secret. But all that much of what he was hiding inside was building to create, his body to turn against himself and have cancer. He was a really good person. And I didn't blame him for the affair, because I asked my mom a bunch of questions after the fact and found out she was a pretty terrible wife, to be a wife part of a husband part, and she had no clue, even though they weren't having sex for years.
Wow. And what age did your father pass?
53, 54, 52,
Wow.
somewhere
So
thereabouts.
young.
Yeah, in the 80s. It was the early 80s.
Sad.
Whenever I had met my husband, he and I met at that point
You met him when you were what? Oh,
almost 18 and a half, almost 19.
okay.
And so we got married. I met him as 18, married like within 6 months, something like that.
He was a
Wow.
JW too.
He was.
Okay.
Was he in
And
your Kingdom Hall, or did you meet him in
no,
an assembly? Or tell us.
his family had moved there to, they just moved there from up north, from Massachusetts. He was not happy with his life, and he was the youngest. He was a boy of 5 sisters. They were all older than him.
Oh wow.
And so at 14, he was a very hard worker. He had been working in school. They were not considered what you or I or any of us would consider a strong Jehovah Witness family.
Spiritually weak.
They what they did is they moved around a lot. They go to a congregation, make friends, and go to meetings, but not ever really progress. But his father was an interesting character, because his father did photography as a hobby, and he had photographed Kennedy and a whole bunch of people.
Wait,
So
what? Stop. You're glazing over it. Okay, wait. He photographed Kennedy? Which Kennedy? Like the President Kennedy?
The dead Kennedy. Yeah, because in the 60s, I remember, and he had pictures of the Kennedys.
Like professionally,
Like a journalist?
photographed them, or
what kind of
capacity?
I think he would have been what you would classify as, they get a camera and they take it very seriously. They weren't considered a professional.
Serious hobbyist photographer.
There you go. That's what it's called. Hobbyist.
Yeah.
Right. He just did not like his life for a variety of reasons, because his dad was the ultimate narcissist. They were nice people, but it's like, isn't it? My husband's name was Bob. Bob used to say, everything's about my dad. Everything's about my dad. Unfortunately, he had a very good sense of self. And so he went out to Florida from Massachusetts to live with a cousin there. And so he would have been living as like a worldly person, so to speak, from 14 and, until he eventually met me and we got married. He's in St. Petersburg, Florida, and he's a very hard worker. People used to be a hard worker, they really did. And so he's a bus boy, and he's this and he's that, and he's also getting his GED as a person living on their own. And he was also very smart, and so he could do anything, so to speak. He eventually wanted to move back to where his family was, and his family had moved to our congregation. And so I'm 17. I'm trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do, how I'm going to survive the rest of my life, because I don't want to be in the religion. I know it's screwed up. I know it ruins lives. I was always very conflicted with the stuff that I read or heard as we're reading it in the Bible. There were so many, my brain was on critical thinking, hyper. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, just so many things did not add up. And I would ask my mom continuously questions, or my brother or anyone, you know, I would ask, like, so why is it that this God, Jehovah, is considered a loving God, but yet they send all of these people to go kill these other people and rape the women and bring, yeah. Could you explain that to me? It just didn't make any sense. All the violence, that there was nothing about that that felt like a representation of something that had to do with love. And I questioned it. I was questioning most of my years. I really was. I was questioning, you know how, like, we know there's a lot of stuff that took place in our religion that is now considered like really not good and scandalous, and yet we on the outside, we got it, it's scandalous, it's bad, a lot of it's criminal. I was seeing it in the religion
In real time.
They're in that beginning of that congregation, our congregation being built, they at one point went to the other neighboring congregations of people that kind of lived on the edge of our territory, and to give the young men, like the guys in their 20s, an opportunity to come to our congregation as what would be considered a ministerial servant. Then they would be the leaders of our congregation. Picture rednecks. Okay, I can say that. Okay. So rednecks, and they now have the biggest egos and heads, because now they are lording over all of these new people coming into the congregation.
Yeah, it's a narcissist dream.
Oh boy. And so one of the guys who was a few years older than me, he would have been about the same age as my sister. And in high school, you know, he and his brother, they played football, and they were, you know, they were jerks then. And so now we didn't know that they were Jehovah Witnesses. And so they are now young men with their wives and their little babies, if they even had any kids. And now they're head of the congregation. And so they ruled and made up the law, made up the rules as they went along. One guy's name was Billy, the Billy regime, like the cartel, like the Billy regime. Okay, so it was the Billy regime. We were one of those congregations that had a lot of this kind of stuff going on that was so upsetting to my dad, to me, to other people who were willing to say and could see that this isn't right. The way that people were being treated, the rules that were randomly being made. You know, it's a congregation without the policing of, except for that once every however long the circuit overseer comes, right? There was a lot of stuff that took place in the congregation that it was too difficult to stomach, in my opinion. And I had to watch my mom and other people take stuff, you know, like, you know, that Billy is over here being improper with some woman, but yet he's given the talk about, you know, if you're wanting to go out on a date. It's like, it just was.
Wait a minute. You're saying that even back then, they were abusing their power and being inappropriate? No.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And so that is a lot of my bitterness. That is a lot of my bitterness about JW. I was not in an area or a congregation that somehow or another was established and everything just was kind of copacetic. No, it was a shit show from the beginning. It really was. And I can never forget my mom, how every little piece of literature that came out, oh my God, the manna from heaven. They would say, Jehovah has blessed us with manna from heaven.
Jehovah provides.
I knew that this guy, I met him at the congregation. We actually met at a softball game. Was the first time I saw him, because I told my mom I have to take a break. I was 17. And I said, I can't go to the meetings, Mom. I can't do it. I couldn't stomach it. I couldn't stomach the Billy regime. I couldn't stomach what they were doing to my dad. They literally were treating my dad miserably. They were constantly attacking him and chastising him for the stupidest things because he got baptized. Now they could.
Yeah,
Right.
they own you.
That's the
They
trick.
own you. When you get
Yes.
baptized, they own you. That's what that is.
Yeah.
That's
And
why
he-
I never got baptized. And that's why
And in that
probably
Southern way, they
Cindy
did
never
it.
got
too.
baptized. Because
Yeah.
like you
Me
know it.
too.
Even as a young person, I knew it. I was like, if you get baptized, they own you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
So once he got baptized, boy, they treated him poorly. They delighted in,
Making his life miserable.
yeah, they did. And the reason I was saying before he got baptized is because he was persecuting, they would call it persecuting my sister, because he wanted her to go to college. And he,
What persecution? Oh my goodness.
How horrible. What a
That's just
terrible
horrible.
dad.
Yeah.
he wanted her to go to college. He wanted her to,
Have a better
do,
life.
yeah, yeah. And she was gonna do her GED and pioneer at
Yeah,
the same time at age
This is your
16.
older sister that was fully
Yeah.
indoctrinated. She was
Yeah.
all in.
And what she also did is, because my dad literally stopped her from going to one meeting, that was when he became a violent opposer, they called it. He wouldn't let her go to the meeting. And so at that point, my mom and my dad's relationship really kind of split then, because now she was told by the brothers that she may need to practice spiritual warfare.
Oh
So
my
that
gosh.
she
It's
could
just
do,
it's so crazy the way they like insert themselves into a marriage and into a family where they don't even freaking belong. Like, you're talking about a relationship between a father and a daughter. You don't belong there.
Yeah, mind your own
Pisses me off.
business. That's what I
Yeah.
say. Mind your own this is not your business.
so my sister ran away. She went to the neighboring congregation. She lived with it. They set her up with some pioneer sister there. They took care of her.
Wait. So because your dad was like wanting to help her get a better education, they literally told
They
your
helped her?
sister to run away and to go to someone else's house, another witness's
This
house in a
is
nearby congregation? Am
so
I hearing
wrong.
this right?
Yeah. In other words, when you're in the religion and you're so brainwashed that anything outside of what the religion has told you is important, and for her, that would be pioneering, right? Lining herself up to be a pioneer, instead of continuing in school. But she got her GED and she got a little job somehow or another, and she became a pioneer. My youngest brother at the time, he hurt himself at school, and they were called, and he ended up going to the hospital, which is a big deal because the hospital was, in an hour away. For somebody to go to the hospital, man, it was a big deal. I was not even born in a hospital. I grew up in a country setting, doctor. I was born in the back of a drugstore, Rexall drugs. I was born
Different era. Again, different era. Mhm.
a different era. When my brother was at the hospital, my mom and dad are there, and she was being exactly like the typical JW that is going to do or say whatever they need to do for the sake of what Jehovah would want. Meaning, the doctors had told my mom that my brother would very likely need a blood transfusion. And the doctors were telling my mom and my dad that your son is damaged his spleen. We may have to operate and remove it, and we will have to give a blood transfusion. And without skipping a beat, my mom said, no, we are not going to allow a blood transfusion. And my newly baptized dad goes, yes, we are. My dad wasn't having that. And so, because he was only baptized for the sake of that, not for the sake of the religion or any of the beliefs. Okay. He was baptized for the sake of keeping the family together. My mom comes home and she tells us kids how something has happened and how dad is being, which was so horrible, and that she was planning with some of the brothers,
The elders, probably.
the one that had started the congregation and originally the Pennsylvania Dutch people that she trusted. They were going to help her to figure out how to get my brother out of the hospital and hide him away.
Were they going to do an escape plan?
Because dad was going to let the doctors do a blood transfusion. So mom was going to figure out how to get my brother away from that situation.
Oh my gosh.
And so whenever I see XJWs talk about the blood issue and how that was a big deal, yeah, that was a big deal.
Well, what happened? You can't leave us hanging.
My brother recovered where they didn't have to do the operation and the blood transfusion.
Oh, and he got to keep his spleen. Right?
I think he did.
Oh, that's good, actually.
Yeah, I think that it's like there was this, packing of bags, putting bags in the cars to run away and to steal away. And there was like this thing that my mom had done, and she was warning us. And I was the older kid at that time because my sister was, off being a pioneer in another town. That,
left.
And my mom is talking to me, and I'm just like, I'm like listening like that and quiet. And I'm thinking, wow, this is what my mom, and that was another reason why I couldn't do the religion, is because the links of what was important, your life, your blood card, your all that stuff meant all of it. You had to obey, or you were screwed if you didn't obey. And so my mom, her spirituality meant she had to obey, which was, if necessary, quote, take him out of the hospital and hide him away.
Which is threatening her other son's life. This is crazy. She's already lost one son, and now she's okay with risking her other son because some men told her to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
it's just a disrespect, lack of respect for life all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cult.
Yeah. I knew it was not right, and I remember being in that anxious state and everything. And then whenever, somehow or another, they said that David was just had to stay in the hospital for whatever period of time, a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was. And so the doctors would have been the kind of doctors that were confronted with working with Jehovah Witnesses and how they would structure caring for a patient outside of the concept of they would normally give a blood transfusion. Whenever I experienced all this, I had said, I got to take a break. The official cover story was that I was going to other congregations, explaining why I wasn't there, because I was driving and everything. I have my own car, why I wasn't at our own congregation, our own meetings.
So it just hit me. You describing this. You were one of the first PIMOs. Like, you know what I mean? Like you came up with the idea of what now they do now without even realizing it. Cause that's what they do now. They just pretend they're going to other congregations and they just slowly fade out.
Wow. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Lily, you are the original OG PIMO. How does it feel? OG PIMO in
What
the
does
building.
OG PIMO.
What does OG mean?
Original
Original.
gangster.
Original. Well, imagine that. So what I did at 17 was I took a break in the sense of trying to just figure out how to not go to meetings. And my mom just kind of kept it quiet. Nobody knew, nobody was the wiser.
JWs care more about image. So when you told her that, it was all about covering up so she wouldn't tarnish her image.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And I was newly baptized, you know.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I told her how I felt at baptism, you know. And so it's kind of funny that they hold me, every single one of my siblings and my mom and my 40 years of friends all hold me to that baptism as to why they don't talk to me. When I was out of the religion, there was nothing that was taking place. I mean, I was never talked to. Brothers never talked to me, nothing.
Did you fade or did you fade and then they caught you and got caught up to you and then you got disfellowshipped?
My husband, Bob, committed suicide because of the religion. And whenever my family all wanted me to come back to meetings, I said I can't. And each of them told me that then I would be like I was dead to them.
And how old were you when your husband died and committed suicide?
40, age 40.
Okay.
Yeah. My already struggling with being in a JW family husband, when we met, which we met at a softball game, I'm playing softball and there's this guy, you know, attractive guy, and he's playing softball. And he threw a ball and he threw it so hard that it hit me in the face. And then that led to us then having a conversation after the game and instantly hitting it off.
Talk about knocking you on your feet,
Oh my
literally,
God! Right?
or
Yeah.
off your feet. Yeah. Whoa. And you were 18 at the time, right? When you met?
Almost 18, maybe.
You guys were all
Yeah.
the same age,
We
right?
we were. He was born the first part of the month, and I was born the middle part of the month.
Oh
So
wow!
we were both Libras.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He didn't have a car. I did. So I took him home and we just became instant best friends, talking all the time. I now had a reason to be in the religion. He said to me when I was leaving that night from talking for hours at his house, he said, "Well, I'll see you at the meeting." And then it hit him. He said,
Boy.
"Well, wait a minute. Do you go to meetings?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Well, I haven't seen you and I've been there for about a month." And I said, "Oh, I've been going to other congregations."
Oh, funny.
Yeah, it is funny. He and I eventually got married, you know,
Yeah, he was your reason you came back. And so then you were back with to be with him. And then you got married how many years after you met?
6 months, I think she said,
6
right?
months.
6 months.
6 months. So that's important for people to understand that the JW culture, it's so fast. When you meet somebody, they pressure you. 6 months later, you're married. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
you were what, 19?
Yeah.
18, 19?
I had turned 19 and then got married. So I was turned 19 in October, got married in February.
Yeah, did you have a chaperone?
Yeah.
Not exactly.
I have so many questions because you married him at 9. You guys got married at 19. It's like you guys couldn't even drink a beer. Wasn't there a time where people could drink?
There
think it
was
was
a time
18.
when it was like 18
So
or
could
so.
you drink a
Yeah.
beer at that time?
I think it was 18.
Okay, so you could drink a beer at your wedding.
Yes,
Woohoo! Have a glass of wine.
I did because I had been drinking beer on my lunch hour. So,
Oh, naughty Lily.
well, it was the thing. People, it's hot. You drink a cold beer.
Mm,
So yeah. So no, I was legal. I could buy alcohol.
okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So basically, my husband and I got along really great as friends. We were besties. There was a couple of times where I couldn't take it anymore at the meetings. I really had a hard time. I learned how to do all these mental mind games with myself while at the meetings in order to survive them. My mind was just seeing so many faults and flaws and all this stuff.
Called mental gymnastics.
I did.
Mhm.
I invented all these little word games on paper. I'd look like I was taking notes, and I would do things like see how many words I can spell out of one word.
See, more early PIMO strategies. I'm
Yeah.
sure PIMOs do that stuff too.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I I just did it as survival because I had great friends. I had many, many great friends. My whole family, once my dad was passed, not in the picture, and even before then, because my mom, everybody moved to New Jersey. We were all there, all of us siblings and everybody. It was a really happy environment, but not happy for me inside, knowing that I just was pretending in the religion.
Put on the new personality, and that wasn't your personality.
Mm-mm. But what
Yeah.
did happen is that going to hang out and do things with all these people in other congregations meant we got to be in situations where Bob and I were driving home late at night and we started listening to what at the time was called Coast to Coast Radio, talk radio.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
I
Mhm.
remember
And
that
all
too.
of these controversial subjects, these political subjects, these subjects about aliens,
Yes.
about
Yeah,
other
I remember
planets,
that.
about,
All the fun conspiracies.
all
The
of
fun
that.
stuff. Exactly.
Yep. That really helped get us where we were learning about stuff and learning about the world, so to speak. They benefited me in the sense that I was awoke a long time ago. All right. But it didn't benefit Bob because he struggled with the JW versus what he's learning on the outside.
Yes, it was messing with him.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much messing with him.
Hmm.
And he also was experiencing, because when a person has experienced trauma, which is a very high percentage within JW, oftentimes it can come out in your 30s. He had experienced where when he was a young boy, he had been in a sexual situation with another man. He was like 17, 18. So he's like 7 or 8 and the person's 17 or 18. So they were older, but it wasn't like an adult man, but it was a grooming situation.
Was
where
it with the JWs within the religion, or was it a separate thing outside?
I never got an answer who the person was because he never told me or talked about it on a lot of detail. He didn't talk about it in those years. What happened is we were at a religious convention. He was singing, we were all singing the song, Jehovah's a Rock. And he started saying, this is all bullshit. This is all bullshit. It's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm hearing him say this, and there are thousands of people singing. And I'm like, I already knew because for a few months he had been kind of acting like on edge and weird, because what I didn't know behind the scenes was happening. He was a ministerial servant, and he was finding out, because he was very close with various elders and whatnot, that there was the typical hiding predators stuff still going on.
Oh, yeah.
And so he had learned about some people that we personally knew, and it really was just freaking him out because this brother was still giving talks, and there was all kinds of, the family, the wife was a pioneer, the daughters were pioneers. He was molesting all his kids.
Wow.
It was
And
just
see, where my mind goes is the chances are that it was a JW thing
it
that
was
happened
yeah.
to him is
Yeah.
a high thing, a high percentage. And the fact that he got so triggered by the information he was hearing tells me that it
Yeah.
hit close to home for him.
It did. It really did, because he, we were definitely, trained that JW, that was not JW. They were not like the Catholic Church. They did not do that. Oh, no, absolutely not. I didn't understand why when the elders asked him to be an elder, he turned it down. And then when they asked him a second time and he turned it down, now I know why. It's because he did not want to be put in that position of being an elder in those kind of situations.
To know that what's going on and feel like he's got to listen to Watchtower's really bad instruction of hiding the information. And deep down, he would know that would make him sick to his stomach that he couldn't do it. So he said, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, there were other things, along the way that happened that led to him announcing, because my family were all there at the assembly together, and they can hear him saying this, and I just get him out of there, and they're like, all, what's going on? And he's saying, I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. You don't understand. And everybody's saying, no, we'll understand. We love you. We don't know what it is, but we will always love you. And he said, if I talk about it, it's the end of the family.
Wow.
He said, if I talk
so
about
much
it,
pressure.
he knew.
Yeah.
He knew. If you talk about what you know, you will be out of the religion.
You'll lose everything.
You'll lose everything
and everyone.
Yeah, that's what he said. It took me maybe a week to get him to at least divulge about what had happened to him. But the way he did it was a very, very weird way. He started talking about how Jehovah's not there for you, and how you do what you're supposed to and you follow all the guidelines, but it's not enough. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it wasn't enough for that little girl. And I'm like, well, thinking, what does he mean, little girl? And so then he's saying about how that little girl didn't salute the flag. She didn't celebrate her birthday. She went to meetings. She did everything she was supposed to, but Jehovah wasn't there to protect her from it. And I realized he was talking about himself. And so then I asked him, I said, were you that little girl? And he said, yes. So he was confirming. And then I asked little bits of questions here and there. And basically that the person went to a medical hospital and was evaluated and released like he didn't really know the time frame. So whatever happened, that's why I think, because the person maybe wasn't 18, they didn't do anything to the person, but somehow or another the person was sent away, and I couldn't understand it. And then, think about trauma. He hid this trauma.
Yeah.
So he tells me, he says, well, no, I couldn't understand. Well, how is it he went away? And he said, well, after the trial. And I'm like, trial? What do you mean trial? And he tells me how there was a trial and how he had to testify as a little kid on the stand at this trial.
More trauma. What?
Yeah. I said, but then he downplayed it all in his mind. He said that if his cousin hadn't told, then nobody would have known and nothing would have happened. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said his cousin, which I knew who his cousin was, his sister, they're all Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay. Evidently, there were two boys, him and his cousin. And the older boy started showing the younger boys pornography and taking them for drives in his car. He was grooming them. And then they one day got in a situation where evidently stuff happened. Bob was taking it to his grave. His cousin eventually told his mom, and his mom called the police. He was held liable in some way, but he didn't get a sentence, at least not in Bob's mind. and he ended up going to a mental hospital and being evaluated and let out. I realized that this kid was still in the neighborhood, still in his company, because he used to tell me how he used to still see him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just like mortified.
What
He
goes-
could have been in the congregation. I really don't know what the deal was.
Right, but you know what goes through my mind in situations like this is that the 17-year-old, he was probably, something happened to that kid.
Yeah, likely.
Yes, so there's a cycle. So adults around him did something to him or something, and now he's doing the cycle and grooming young kids. Oh,
Right, right. He told me it was all okay because something happened and the kid had some crazy accident happen to him, and like he was working on his car and it fell on him or something.
like it
And
was karma,
well, he didn't call it that at the time.
but yeah.
Yeah. That led to him saying to the brothers, I need to step down as a ministerial servant because I can't go to meetings. Because he said, if I have a choice between having to go to a meeting and putting a bullet into my head, he said, it's an easy choice. He wasn't able to just get over what he had finally let out of him. He did go on medicine, to try and help, but basically what was helping was a therapist lady had said to him, what if you gave yourself permission not to go to the meetings? How do you think that would feel? Maybe if you tried that. That is what we were seeing was a possibility that just take the pressure off of him. But the pressure really was only just like released. It was never off because by this time, in my mind, I don't want to go back to meetings. I don't want to deal with that whole subject.
Well, yeah, you've been pretty much woke up this whole time and only there for family and your husband. And now that he's going through this, there's really no reason for you to go back.
Right. Right. It led to where I ended up having a breakdown because my family and our friends were like saying, okay, we can understand why Bob isn't going to meetings. Everybody's still associated with us. We still went out to dinner. We still did things with people. They just knew that Bob was depressed, quote, suicidal depression. We weren't going to meetings. So then the brothers that I knew, people that I knew and whatnot were saying things to me like, maybe you should come back and, where you can have some good association. And so I went a couple of times and I couldn't, it's like it just didn't work for me at all. And if anything, it just made me feel worse. One of my friends said to me something about basically how I needed to go back to meetings or they would have a hard time associating with me. And that led to me having an emotional, physical breakdown, which was like a stroke, where I wasn't able to walk and talk for a little bit of time.
Wow.
And after that, I really mentally, said, what is it you think could help make you happy? Because I know going to meetings is not going to make me happy at all. And so we decided we didn't know the term was soft fade, but we decided to try and just move someplace where nobody knew us and just be us. And so that we moved cross country. We moved to an area where he could ski and mountain bike all the time and also do his profession. He was an artist. And so it seemed like it was going to be okay, but then it was getting closer to Y2K.
I remember that in the 2000s. They were
Yes.
like,
Yeah, the meltdown. And our best friends, they were still supportive of us as they still stayed in touch with us. And, they kept encouraging us. And so they were calling and talking about how it was another date, an end date again.
Of course, Watchtower is going to jump on stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, it had happened many times. We had lived through several, it's almost here time frame, especially 1975 is a whole nother subject.
Right. But they're not going to let a good opportunity or a good scare mongering go to waste.
That's right. That's right. They started as, not me, but getting Bob worried. He had been in a lot of intensive therapy. So, because he continued therapy whenever we went out west, he continued, and he was starting to discover things about himself, I guess. Maybe in his mind, he was, if we had known, I think if there was an ex community, I think it would have been different.
Right,
But
because it wasn't back then. There was no
there was nobody to talk to about it.
Yeah, the internet was just starting, right? The internet was just starting to happen.
Yeah.
There was not that easy way to connect to people. Mhm.
We didn't even have a computer, and he had told me a lot of stuff. I mean, he had told me about conversations he had with circuit overseers and district overseers. Everybody, he had talked to a lot of people about the stuff that bothered him. And there was no answer other than just have more faith, brother. He talked about the things that were going on within the organization that were wrong. And he was just told, just hang in there.
And that's what they'll tell you. They'll just keep telling you the answers for any problem are shut up, go to meetings, have faith, leave it in Jehovah's hands.
Yeah. He started to worry because of the world being worried about Y2K. He started asking me questions like, well, what if they're right? What if the religion is right and Armageddon happens and we're not going to meetings? And I myself did not want to live in a world of Jehovah Witnesses, is what I told him. He says, well, what if, you died and you get resurrected and it's all Jehovah Witnesses? And I said, I will find a cliff and jump off it because I don't want to live in a world of JWs.
Right.
I mean, I was really serious about it. There was no way I was going back.
I know, that's torture. Why would you think that's fun for us? You think that a life of just being with indoctrinated sheep JWs is something where like, I can't wait to be there. I don't care how many lions, tigers, and bears I can touch. No, thank you.
I guess it crossed in his mind because he asked me because I had thought I could never live without him. And so when he first was suicidal, we had talked about possibly dying together. Now that we were out, I didn't call it out, just enough time that I had met some other people outside the religion. I wanted to see what it was that just was out there.
Yeah.
Because I already knew that the religion, that the concept of Jehovah and Jesus and what I had experienced was not anything that I could see of love. He, I guess in his mind, he picked the date, but he didn't tell me, of course. He picked the time and everything, and he waited for me to leave the house. And then he called the police and he said, if you don't want her to find me, you need to get here before she gets back. And so he killed himself one by one. My family was going to come out and see me because there wasn't a funeral, there was no service or anything like that. I went through that whole experience by myself, alone, other than the police were very nice. They were helpful.
I'm sorry you went through that, Lily. And even the funeral, even if there had been a funeral, the JW funeral is not a funeral. Yeah, they don't
No, yeah, that's the point. Exactly. You just thank you for clarifying that and making the point. And the thing is that what's bizarre? Okay, so we just kind of faded away. So he has a breakdown and we go across country. All of these 40 years of knowing JWs and having really friends, okay, couples and all this stuff. I wasn't getting phone calls. We weren't, other than, the best friends that were keeping in touch with us. I did not get phone calls from people saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I hear Bob died. I didn't get that. I didn't have the elders never Not a one of them called to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. We know how troubled he was. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. And my family came one by one, and each of them told me how everybody loved Bob, everybody loved Bob, everybody loved Bob. Okay, great. We got that. But now you need to come back to where it's safe. You need to come back home and be with the family and people who love you. Because I've never been on my own, and I'm 40 years old. I was a housewife, a JW housewife.
Yeah, that was typical for JW.
Not prepared for anything about life.
Nope.
And they said, you need to come back. And I said, I can't go back to meetings. I'm not. Each one of them said, we love you, but we're not going to be able to have anything to do with you. So each one of my family members told me that unless I came back to meetings, then they were going to treat me like a disfellowship person, because I was not ever talked to by anyone as if I had done anything. So it's like it was ultimate shunning. When I hear the different people telling their stories and the different things, and it's like, I do wish, like, I know we've talked before about, the potential lawsuits and the things that people could have. And I do wish that there was some sort of lawsuit that you could lump people like me into that scenario. I mean, I don't think that class action lawsuit is necessarily an answer, because I don't want a settlement. I want it public.
Yeah.
And if you do a class action, it's usually a settlement.
And then sign an NDA.
Yeah. So it's like, what good? Yeah, maybe somebody will get a little bit of money, or even if they got a lot of money, like that one. But it's whether or not, if the truth of what we experienced as people, as human beings, comes out.
Where's your mom now? Where's your siblings? And where do you stand currently?
Okay. When they did that announcement that they had changed the shunning policy, I contacted each of my siblings, and I contacted my mother, who's in her 90s. She and I have had some conversation over the years, because I think when a person is getting older, and, she would reach out to me to tell me the end was almost near and I need to come back. So we'd have those conversations, but I was able to get to a point where I was able to help her to at least hear me, and she said, I know you never believed it. So she did tell me she knows I never believed it. Of course, I'd have to come back to meetings. I called the various siblings and my elder brother, he was my youngest brother, and now he's an elder and has been for a long time.
Oh, wow. He's an elder. Okay.
And so I could get it from an elder's perspective. I could get the real deal, because each of my siblings basically said, are you willing to come back to meetings? And I said, no. And they said, well, then we're not going to have anything to do with you. And I said, I was never disfellowshipped. I never disassociated. I never did any of that. So could you explain to me why you treat me like a disfellowship person? And just that they knew how I felt, that I wasn't going to go to meetings. My elder brother, he did say, I do know that you feel that your baptism was not valid, and I can see a validity in what you had to say. Because I said, if I hadn't got baptized because Mom forced me, I said, you at least all would be talking to me. And he said that if you choose to be like me, they still consider it that you disassociated yourself, even though they never officially did anything or even ever officially reached out and talked to me.
Wow. What a
They
loving arrangement. What a loving thing.
they consider you disassociated.
Yeah.
He said that it's they can now just talk to somebody. If they come in the congregation, they can say hello to them. And I said,
Oh,
well, it was like that
yippee.
before.
Yeah, yippee.
I said, how is it different? So that was that was just a PR campaign.
Yeah.
It wasn't different. That was they were trying to do some sort of damage control. There were no real changes.
No, it's all because of Norway. They wanted the money back. They wanted the government's money. We all know what that was. That was all
Yeah.
fake PR so they could
Yeah.
get the money back from Norway.
And I did get to say to my brother, as I'm out, I says, I know there's a lot of controversy. And I know that there's a lot of stuff. And I said, David, I could send you tons of evidence right now from elder Jehovah Witness who's are in but out. And he said, it wouldn't matter. He said, what else is there outside the religion?
Well, yeah, that's the programming. They all say that. They say their thing is if you can't give them another solution, that it doesn't matter if that what they're in isn't the solution. They're going to stay there because there isn't any other solution.
And that, what you just said, factored into my husband's thinking. Because we were learning about the world. We were learning about all the ugly political, there was a book, Jekyll Island,
It's about the Federal Reserve.
and the power families and how they were really the ones who decided the presidents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how the president's
Chosen.
selected. Yep,
Yep.
not elected. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. All that.
Mhm.
That you just stated factored into his thinking.
Yes. And that's just
So,
what they do to keep you in, JWs. Watchtower uses that stupid saying, "Oh, God always had an organization, so if this isn't the organization, then where is the organization?"
where else are you going to be happy? And he said it. He quoted it verbatim
But my
to me.
question to JWs is this: then where was the organization in the 1700s? If God's always had an organization, what was the organization in the 1700s before Charles Taze Russell came into the picture? They won't be able to answer it. There's no answer to it because none of it makes sense.
I believe that religion is created to control people.
Yes,
I do.
I do too. And the sooner humans realize this, the sooner they can be free. Because right now, religion is shackling them, politics is shackling them,
Yep.
and they continue to go round and round and round in a hamster wheel, getting
Yep.
nowhere. So, yeah, I agree
And
with you.
there are many current conversations that we could have about some of these ties to some of these organizations that are going under a religious title or header or something. There's so much that's very not seeming right in that whole process, like what OUR was doing and other people are trying to do. I think they're a good-hearted people. They have a good motivation. I have come to learn, that there are grants. There's a lot of grant money that is set aside for people to set up an organization. They can become an advocate. They call it, there's like a criteria that they have of what they can then, where they can receive money.
They can access those grants.
Yeah. So then they can be classified and do an advocacy work, then they can, I guess, somehow or another petition for this grant money. That's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Well, that's also why, as you know, me and Cindi did those earlier podcasts on where are all the critical thinkers, because we see this advocacy going around and we don't know any of these people. We don't know what their true agendas are. And we want people to be questioning things and just to be aware of what you just said. There is money to be had. And
Yeah.
we're not saying that's what's happening, but we're saying it's possible, and it's happened many times over, like the Tim Ballard situation. So
Well, that's what got me, into that concept, is because I know a lot of Mormons, and my friend tried to get me into Visions of Glory. It's like, I know this subject from the inside.
and you were like, heck no, I left a cult. Why would I jump into even a crazier one? Do you have any final words that you want to share or anything?
Well, I certainly didn't think that when you said you wanted to tell my story that it would lead to all this that was said.
Yeah.
So,
There was
but
a lot that we talked about that was just fascinating. I had no idea.
yeah, there's other details and other things, that I've experienced, kind of crazy, but at the same time, most of what has happened has been a result of what I experienced, as a JW.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling your story. I really appreciate you even like allowing us to share your story and choosing us to share your story. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank
And
you, and I do appreciate
we
it.
lost Cindy, but
But
we know her love is with us right now.
yeah,
I think it's a wrap.
it's a wrap.
I think it is.
Thank
So,
you. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you.
All right. Night.
Good night.